In October 2022, Archive of Our Own, also known as AO3, had a membership drive that raised over $250,000. Archive of Our Own is a non-profit open source website for fan fiction and other fan works. It was created in 2008 and as of now has over 10 million works hosted on the site. And there are over 5 million users. Some younger fanfiction writers have some strong opinions about this amount raised. A Twitter user says, AO3 getting millions of dollars almost every year in donations, but as a fic author, you can't even mention needing money at the end of your own fic, because AO3 will ban you swiftly for that. Can't even have a button that's like, hey, if you liked my work, please consider just $1. They also suggest maybe even having like a tip account or being able to link to a GoFundMe. A copyright lawyer broke it down, explaining why the fair use doctrine allows folks to use IP in limited contexts in the US without getting sued. They said all fan works are infringing by default. When you invoke the fair use defense, you're saying, yes, I did infringe on this copyright, but because of XYZ. When you write fan fiction or draw fan art, you're engaging with someone else's copyrighted work. You're allowed to do this, but you have to understand you're doing it with certain rules that need to be followed. Two of the big factors in determining whether you can use the fair use defense are whether you were being paid or how much of the original work you used. There are a lot of creators who are fine with fan work now. However, they're only fine because fan work is free. A lot of people are confused because if you go to a convention, you go on Etsy, you can see a lot of fan art that's for sale, and obviously people make profit from that. The reason fan art is more generally acceptable than fan fiction is because fan art captures a single moment, while fan fiction uses character setting themes. Fair use is a balancing test, and writing versus art tips the scales in different directions. Reading some more takes from younger fandom members has got us realize that maybe they don't remember the Anne Rice debacle. It's not a tale she would want you to tell. We entered fandom space in the early 2000s, so this was a little bit before our time, but by that time, it became more of like a urban legend that was actually true. And it terrified a lot of writers. It made us put these silly disclaimers on our fics. Like my very first Star Wars fanfiction, I wrote, I don't own Star Wars, so don't sue me. Trust me, I'm not worth your time. 11-year-old Candace was not ready to be sued. So back in the day of Livejournal, Jory Van Rice. Rice is the author of the book series The Vampire Chronicles, which have been made into popular movies like Interview with the Vampire and Queen of the Damned. The former has recently been made into a TV show as well, but we'll get back to that later. Unlike most authors who ignore fanfiction, or a few that actively encourage it, like Neil Gaiman, Rice was very vocal about not being a fan of fan works based on her characters. In 2000, she addressed this issue saying, I do not allow fanfiction. The characters are copyrighted. It upsets me terribly to even think about fan fiction with my characters. I advise my readers to write your own original stories with your own characters. It's absolutely essential that you respect my wishes. However, Rice didn't stop there. She paid lawyers to remove all fan fiction from the internet, including sending an email to fanfiction.net telling them to remove all fan work based on her books or face legal action. Fanfiction.net removed everything related to Rice's characters from the site and banned all future stories as well. I went on fanfiction.net and I checked the categories. There's still no Interview with a Vampire on either the books or TV show or movie category. When searching, I can see there's a few fics that are under the vampire myth, parody, or under just the general poetry. Rice allegedly went even further, going after specific authors, threatening them via email and letters for weeks on end, and having her employees dig up personal information about them in order to harass them further. It's rumored she even doxed some authors. Fanlore.org features an article that's from an Angelfire website. Gosh, that takes you back. From April 2000, which is around the time all this stuff went down, and explains that there have been disclaimers on these fanfictions for years, but Anne Rice doesn't consider it acceptable. Rice's lawyer, Christine Cuddy, says, Even when done on a non-profit and or amateur basis, such uses of Anne's characters without Miss Rice's permission can constitute copyright infringement. According to this Angelfire site, no one was trying to make money from their Anne Rice fanfiction, and that the only times money changed hands were when fanfic authors and fans bought Anne's own work. They said if you want to write fanfiction, there's a threat of personal harassment. And it's not worth it since Anne Rice has money and she will make you stop. As a result, fanfiction about her characters all but disappeared from the internet. They had some advice about how to work around this without getting in trouble with Rice. They say, do not put your story up on a website. Share the stories with others in emails. Do not attach your real name to the story. Use a pen name instead. Create an anonymous email for yourself. Use a free server like GeoCities or Angelfire. Again, classics. We can't say Anne Rice was the only one who did this. According to Vice, Fox sent cease and desist letters to the writers of X-Files fanfiction, and J.K. Rowling even used her lawyers to threaten writers of adult Harry Potter fanfiction. It seems that Anne Rice just really loved her characters and was very possessive of them. She even admits to it. And I don't think she liked the idea of anyone else playing with them. While some other writers see this as a compliment that people are so inspired by their works and their characters, she just didn't want to share. In 2012, it seems she changed her tale a little bit. She says, I don't want to read about my character in someone else's writing. It's too upsetting for me because they're mine and from my mind. I never read fanfiction. Other writers feel differently about it and are happy and encouraging of it. I don't make judgments. I prefer to ignore it. But if 50 Shades of Grey grew out of that, well, there are no rules. Books can come out in a variety of ways. She told Metro, it's been very easy to avoid reading any, so live and let live. If I were a young writer, I want to own my own ideas. But maybe fanfiction is a transitional phase. Whatever gets you there, gets you there. A lot of people find it ironic or even hypocritical of Rice to be disapproving of fanfiction when she herself is using a vampire myth based on past tales like Carmilla and Dracula. While also she wrote a Sleeping Beauty based books, which I read way too young. I should not have. And again, they're based on someone else's original story. There is a touch of irony with that. In 2005, she wrote Christ the Lord Out of Egypt, and its sequel came out in 2008, Road to Cana. And it detailed the early life of Christ as both a human man and an avatar of the divine. And a few people did call her out on the fact that she was writing another form of fan fiction. The creators of the new TV version of Interview with a Vampire are actually encouraging fan works. They are promoting a new mobile app that lets fans create visual novels and even game virtual currency for them. There's also a writing club which involves daily writing sessions for fan fiction authors. This brings us to AO3, which was born out of necessity because of such legal issues. As Twitter user Brosnaya explained, as a non-profit, AO3 is able to face the world and say all of our fanfiction is free. Their policy is in place so they are able to, in good faith, certify that all the fanfiction on their site is unpaid. It's a massive boost to the fair use defense. It means that if anyone sues the site or an author on the site, they'll have a much harder time of winning. What AO3 is doing isn't only to protect you legally, it's to make sure that no one tries to sue you. However, that's not to say that fanfiction writers aren't making money from their work. Many AUs have been changed enough to become original works. AU stands for Alternate Universe, and imagines the characters in completely different situations or settings. For instance, a popular AU trope is to have the characters meet in a coffee shop. So for example, like Anne Rice was saying, 50 Shades of Grey was actually a Twilight fanfic before it was revised and became a best-selling book and movie series. Whether you like it or not, it was a cultural phenomenon that made millions. It was an AU called Master of the Universe, where Edward was a billionaire into BDSM, and he wasn't a vampire. And Bella was pretty much the same character, which, you know, just means Bella. But the author changed the names before she self-published these works as original fiction. However, according to a few different sources, the work itself is largely unchanged from what the fanfiction was. Even though, in theory, Christian Grey is supposedly an original character, he's very much an Edward Cullen type, from being a good piano player, from stalking a girl. And honestly, Stephanie Myers, the author of Twilight, probably could have sued James, but she didn't. When Meyer was asked by MTV News, she says, "I've heard about it. I haven't really gotten into it that much. Good for her. She's doing well. That's great." And it makes sense because Twilight was so huge because of its fans and its fandom. Another book that started as fan fiction is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. It was a Reylo, aka Kylo/Rey from the Star Wars movies, fic. It recently even got a movie deal. So yes, there are ways that fic writers are turning their works into something original and something new. What do you think of what Anne Rice did? Do you agree with what she did? Do you remember hearing the stories when you entered fandom like we did?